I'm Joshua Dadone. I've worked for the library now for I think like 11 years. I work in the IT department, and the Makerspace is part of the IT department. I've been helping to run it since the departure of our last coordinator, Ira, who some of you will know. Basically the Makerspace, it was founded in like 2014 in our old library. But we are just a resource for the community to come in and have access to a bunch of STEAM-based resources, meaning science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So we've got access to 3D printers and software and 3D modeling resources. We've got a 3D scanner. We've got a digitization station here for if you bring in like reel-to-reel or VHS or old audio tapes, digitize them there. We've got desktop CNC. We've got a big old laser engraver and cutter, which is like my favorite thing here. And then we've got things like sewing, soldering, jewelry, arts and crafts. We have people of all ages come in, all different experience levels. Some kids come in, you know, straight from flagship, and they already know how to work these programs like way better than any of us do here, which is like the coolest thing, I think. But then, you know, people who may have, you know, missed the entire kind of technology thing during their lifetime, and now they're coming in on their leisure time, and they're able to make gifts for their families, or just explore things that they've always wanted to, always had an interest in. I'm really excited to have Cait here. She was a volunteer in the old Makerspace close to its inception, so it's really cool to have this kind of come full circle. We've got Steve, who's an alum. He did a residency here. So, I mean, you can come in. We have open hours, or we have appointment times where you can come in and book and get your questions answered. Work on projects that you have. We have people from all throughout the community working on many different things. They come in and use us as a resource. We've had people proof prototypes for things that they make and now sell. And yeah, if you ever want to come in, just check out our website or come in and stop in and ask any questions that you want, and then we can get you started on, you know, your discovery of the process of all these different things. But that's really all I had. So without further ado, I'll let somebody else take it away.
Thanks, Joshua.
Totally.
So I have the pleasure of introducing Cait today. So Cait Finley is an American artist working in Montana. They hopes to solve environmental destruction through pleasure. Her work is about the differences between human perceptions of time and geological time. Using sculpture, writing, video, and performance, she fantasizes kinships with entities much larger and more nebulous than herself, preferring to think of things like petroleum, capitalism, and global warming as entities in order to see more clearly how they fit within human narrative timelines, and exploring the ways humans attempt to speed up and slow down geological time to more comfortably align with our corporeal, fleeting understanding of being. Finley received an MFA in sculpture from Syracuse University in Syracuse, New York, and a BFA in ceramics from the University of Montana in Missoula, Montana, exhibiting nationally at Art Helix in Brooklyn, New York, CB1 in Los Angeles, California, Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, and internationally at Bunsunrad Gallery in Bangkok, Thailand, and Das Gift in Berlin, Germany. She's been the recipient of the Freeman Asia Fellowship, the Mansfield Fellowship, and granted artist in residence at the University of Montana in Missoula, Montana, Anderson Ranch in Snowmass, Colorado, OxBow in Saugatuck, Michigan, as well as the Turner Residency in Los Angeles, California. Finley currently teaches at the University of Montana. So, welcome, Cait. Is this okay? Such an attractive group of people in here.
I wrote my first land acknowledgement. If I say something stupid, please tell me after the talk. I'm pretty new at this and I'm learning, so I really thank you guys so much for coming. I'm kind of overwhelmed. Okay. As As somebody who thinks about climate change, land loss, and our current extinction event in my work and life, I am reminded of a stark fact. Indigenous peoples comprise less than 5% of the world's population and protect 80% of global biodiversity. Today, I acknowledge the land we are currently on as the Aboriginal territories of the Salish, Kalispel, and Kootenai people. These are not the only indigenous peoples who have inhabited the Montana region, and we acknowledge them too. And then in order to protect and cherish the land, we need to empower more Native voices. It's been so long since I've done any kind of public speaking. You guys too? Okay. I'm Cait Finley. That's my website, and there's my Instagram, which I'm fairly active on. I live here in Missoula, and I'm an artist and a curator, and I teach art as an adjunct professor on campus here. As Kelly said, I did my undergrad here, and I got my MFA at Syracuse University. Thank you so much to all of you for coming, and thank you so much to Stony and all the folks at Open Air for providing me with this opportunity. Thank you so much for all of the sweet folks here at the Missoula Public Library as well. Taylor, Joshua, and Ed for all your technical support. In this presentation, I will present my work fairly chronologically. First, sort of set-asides will be mixed media works that were exhibited in collections based on a theme. The second group of work is work that I did with my alter ego, Dr. Susan Naulis, who's a heavy metal nature documentarian. And then I also included a material exploration onto work that I've done with growing crystals. And then I'm going to show my most recent body of work and then the work that I'm doing here. This is by no means an exhaustive look at my practice. But these themes seem fitting in relationship to this presentation along with this residency. My work is about the differences between human perceptions of time and its relationship with geological time. I use sculpture, moving image, and a heavy metal nature documentarian alter ego to explore the ways humans attempt to speed up or slow down geological time to better align with our corporeal and fleeting understanding of being. At the core of my practice and my life is a desire to halt ecological destruction, but I choose to think through this complex problem through art objects that tell stories and offer reminders of the nature of bounty and reciprocity here on Earth. These works are all sort of focused around a scientific fact or phenomenon or some research that interests me. And they were often place-driven, and they were made in groups and displayed as sort of specimens with specific taxonomies that explained or even like made up parts of the phenomenon and expanded upon it. And I'd like to use sort of the beauty of these objects to illustrate the strangeness and the wonder and the disgust of a lot of these bodies of research. I see a lot of issues with ecological destruction stemming from the ideas of hierarchy of species, and I think that a lot of that is based off of materiality. And so I have no material hierarchy within my practice as well, or I try to, I attempt to, although that's of course difficult. A lot of these things are made out of clay and found materials and plastic. While I see the infinite destruction of plastic in our world, I don't see it as a moralistic concern, but rather just a set of choices that we make on what we want to live with. I also use the materials that I have access to. So these are porcelain, and that's when I had access to ceramics facilities. Some of the materials will rot, and some of them will fall apart, and then some of them will live a lot longer than I do, like the plastic and the natural materials. This is sort of the beginning work. All of those previous works all exist as an installation, and I would install them all together, and then they have writing or taxonomy or even like little leaflets that explain why they're all together, explain the phenomenon that I'm interested in, and then explain how each of them exhibit there. This was kind of one of the works that began this alter ego character that I'm going to talk about here in a moment, which is where I was starting to lose some of the romance that I had with the material scientific world and the ways in which it exhibits violence in order to learn. So, this is Dr. Susan Naulis, and she started because of a long-time love of nature documentaries with presenters like David Attenborough, and sort of that fascination with like the Indiana Jones type of character as well. I also love communicating the strangeness of the hidden world, of these hidden worlds, and I felt like I needed a scientist to sort of lend credibility to my own research. Simultaneously, she gave me the authority, credibility, and I began pretending that my work was her collections. The specimen and started to make sort of elaborate taxonomies and objects to bring them closer to life and livingness. However, the more scientific, which is me kind of making up science based off of my own research, but the more scientific she became, the more violent and destructive she became too. And so so many forms of academic knowing are actually quite destructive as well. Through killing, experimentation, and dissection, we get to better know the interior lives of objects living in innate. Dr. Susan did all of my field work, and then started destroying specimens right there in the field, and I haven't really known what to do with her since then. Most of these are still shots from video works of her in the field, whether that's like a completely made-up space or sort of an augmented natural space as well. So this is, again, Dr. Susan, and this is a section that I wanted to include because it was a period of working with one specific material and seeing how it reacted, and it's one that I don't make much of anymore, but it was these crystal geos. And so it was just based off of this simple question: what if all of the materials that we've taken out of the earth and all of the chemicals and the concrete and put on top of the surface of the earth, or into trash heaps or into building projects, what happens when with time and heat and pressure they start turning into something different as we have our geodes now? So these were made out of concrete and household chemicals, and then they were planted in the landscape, and then this character went and found them and excavated them and did some like lab work on them. One of the most important things about the crystal projects was this focus on the idea of time, which I feel like humans have a pretty impossible time of thinking in geological time or in scales massive as global warming. It's like very baffling. It turns into this, yeah, we all know that feeling of overwhelm. And the crystals sort of represented time, which, like, the choice to use a single-use plastic is a choice that we make, but if you stretch that out over a long period of time, it loses its morality. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyways, I also, so this was an exhibition I did at Little Berlin in Philadelphia. I was using those crystals, and I was also using these inflatables that are made out of, what are they, like Mylar heat blankets that you can put on in case of emergency. I grew up next to a survivalist community outside of Helena, and so thinking about this, like, ideas of these new geology as well as future survival was kind of where my mind was going with these. I also just really love the texture, and they made this amazing crinkly sound. And then that video back there is video from the lab, and then there's also the fieldwork video. They, like, some of them glow in the dark, and a lot of them are super sparkly, and they have all kinds of chemicals, and they're really nice. They're hard to photograph because they're so sparkly. This was at Cornell in Ithaca. It was also part of a group show too. Since grad school, I've been fortunate to show or work with a number of collectives, and I feel like, speaking to some of the folks that I know in here that are students, like working with a collective is a nice way to get your work in spaces where they have more trust for a group versus a singular artist. This was the first piece that I made with the crystals, which was after watching this documentary. It's kind of goofy, but I still like it. But it was after watching this documentary about a cave bear skull that was found crystallized inside of a cave with ancient paintings that predated the paintings at the Shah. And it put the paintings back like another 40 or 50,000 years just based off of the carbon dating from this thing. And I was just wondering what sort of future thing or people will look back at our sort of collections and be able to date those through our objects. This is kind of a better version of that, and it glows in the dark, which I really like. I'll go into my, oh wait, no, this is my favorite one. Okay, so this is Amazon box that I received a yoga mat in, and then I made like this tall kind of, I was living in Los Angeles, and there's just like so many crystal collectors, and there's, I made this like tall amethyst, like so, out of this Amazon box. And it just, this is actually the last one I made because it was just so good, I stopped. This is kind of focusing on some of the newer, my newest body of work, so, oops, not yet. So this is the middle panel, part of the middle panel from the painting, The Garden of Earthly Lights, from Hieronymus Bosch. I got pretty, like, fascinated with those buildings. So this is the middle panel. The first panel is the garden with Adam and Eve. This is like the middle scene of this proliferation of like humans and beasts, and then the final one is hell. And I got pretty fascinated with this, like, both the time when he was living, which is like the end of the plague and the beginning of the Renaissance, and like demons and angels and hell were all really new concepts. And I was just kind of like, oh, like our new hell is this sort of like, they also had the beginning of the Reformation, so like our new hell is like QAnon naming these like people who are drinking kids' blood, and like instead of angels we have aliens, and like we have these new different types of demons. And so I was just wanting to draw these parallels between our experience, which is a long shot, but using these sort of historical objects to kind of think through time as it is existing for me now. So falling in love with these buildings that are sort of man-made, sort of natural as well. And they're also sort of the quiet observers of this like pretty exciting scene. So I remade those in porcelain and plastic, and then used a shimmery car paint on a lot of them. It was like a very meditative experience to look at a flat picture plane and then try to figure out what like the back would look like or what it might look like in 3D, because they're very not real. In the middle of all of his paintings, there is an egg. There's just one egg in all of them. Usually in the middle. It's pretty cosmic.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
How are you thinking about the podium and like what the object's connecting to in all of these? It strikes me that they're kind of like off over the edge.
Right.
What's that?
Yeah, so originally they were shown in a group show in this massive space in Lubbock, Texas called 5&J. And everybody else was making these really big works, and because I was shipping from here, I needed to make them smaller. And they were clay, so they're super heavy. And so I created those. I used a different laser cutter, but a laser cutter, not the same, to cut out the fluorescent plexiglass sheets. And then I put them on top of very short pedestals that were closer to the ground, so it created a different ground within the space, and also collected all that light so nobody would kick them over as they were walking through this like cavernous space. And they were really gorgeous in the Texas sun.
How big are these pieces?
Like so. There's one over here
At the snack table.
at the snack table. So that I sort of is like an overview of what I was doing before, and since I've been here at the residency, I'll show you. Oh yeah, I put it on my computer. I was taking scans of the sculptures and putting them into space. I'm just still kind of at the beginning stage of that. Let me make sure this isn't. Okay, this is what it's gonna be. And so, sorry about that sound. Yeah, I like being able to make these large. I wanted to put them into like a virtual reality experience where you can walk through them and like maybe some of these abstract ideas between the differences of our time might play. I'm a bit of a control freak, and so that felt like a nice way to be able to actually control the viewer's experience, but I'm really liking them within the landscape. And so I'd like to start kind of putting them into the mountains and making them massive, and taking other objects that I've been scanning and kind of include them in there as well. So that's kind of the start of that. And then I also, so this work was some of the first work where I was ever copying somebody else's work, which was so satisfying and and really relaxing. And I like that sort of thinking through objects as they exist for somebody else. And so I fell in love. I've really loved this sculpture for a long time. It's called the Dying Gall. This is obviously not it. It's much larger. And it lives in Rome. And it's a fascinating one because it's like, it was when Rome was going all over the place and conquering all sorts of people, and they fought the Gauls, or contemporary Gaelic people, and so they were very worthy adversaries, and at the time, that emperor made this very famous sculpture depicting this Dying Gall. He's got like a cut here, but he's also got like his sword, and he's naked because they fought naked. That was like one of their telltale signs, because they were so, that was part of their intimidation tactics, which is just crazy. But the person who made it, there's no depiction other than the historical look. So everybody thought it was like a dying, and it's also very heroic, so they thought it was a dying Roman soldier. But then after a while, they figured out it's actually Gaelish, and it was like this honorary thing for these very worthy adversaries. And so it's had this like really interesting kind of back and forth of like both as the hero and anti-hero and back again. And so I printed myself out one, and it made it with the support materials that I love. It like turned into this like weird science fiction melty guy. And then just kind of kept going on it and seeing the ways in which the 3D printer is weird, and the ways in which, because we expect all this technology just to like work really well, and it does and it doesn't. This one is cool too because it's plastic that turns white when it gets hot. I don't know. And so my friend Nick Kakavas helped me take a scan of myself as the Dying Gall, but instead of like the sword and all of these heroic things, I've got like a water bottle and a vape pen, and things that any modern warrior needs. And then kind of cleaned it up, and then I did some prints of it, of myself. This one glows in the dark, and then this one has an inner tube with it, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what those are for. But yeah, like, I don't know, I guess maybe the last thing I'll say is like, I've never quite known, I've been so thankful for this experience because I've never really known what to do with all of this amazing technology, and I've been fortunate to have access to it a few different times in my life, but like, my work isn't very representative, sorry. My work isn't very representative, and I also am like, you spend time and the material to make something that's sometimes kind of like novel. Like you use this incredible technology to make something, and I'm not saying that novelty is bad, or that I don't have a purpose for it, but I just have never known then what to do with the thing. This one's cool though, it's a Taco Bell bag that somebody scanned. I really like that one. But so, these like, actually being able to experiment with this stuff has been really nice because it's like the bits of like plastic as it fails are way more interesting to me. It's like this is the technology, whereas the object is just like kind of a silly object. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay. Thanks. Thanks everybody for coming.
Questions for Cait?
Yeah. The last one you held, the mistake. Would you call it a mistake, or is that your like Gaussian creature that just?
I so wish I made this thing, but it's like a dragon that just printed really weirdly. But yeah, I really like these things that are happening. I don't quite know what to do with them yet, but yeah, I like that guy. There's like, and then like this is fun too. We were making this. It's a water pitcher, but for some reason it just decided to only print in the middle. It's weird. Yeah.
Steve, do you have a question?
Well, just wonderful work. And I
Oh,
love your
thanks, Steve.
sensibility about color. And it's something I've always struggled with. In your talk, I'm struggling with your comment about morality and your suggestion that somehow time Geos, and I'm just struggling with that in my head.
Yeah.
And when you set aside morality like that, when it's not a moment-to-moment decision, I mean, you're throwing a lot of people under the bus, you know, like Hegel and Kant and Kierkegaard. So long, you know, because they're suggesting that morality is a moment-by-moment decision-making process, as you know, and many artists have suggested that as well. And so I was just surprised. I'm kind of struggling with it a little bit in my head to make sense of it all.
Totally. Yeah. That's a great question. Thank you. And actually, like, I think of myself as like anti-Kantian, like that.
Anti-Kantian?
Kantian.
Oh,
Yeah. But that's like, that could be a different conversation.
yeah.
There was a moment there where I was struggling with my notes because I wrote something kind of specific about that, and I was like, I don't know if I'm quite ready to go into it, but I think now's the time. And it's because, and also you said something there that really interests me, that it's throwing people under the bus, because it's also throwing people exactly under the bus, and it's also throwing like marginalized people and people living on islands, and you know, like the ways in which the changing climate disproportionately affects like Black and brown people, and people with less income, or people living in more polluted places is very constant. So it's not just like the philosophical rolling over. And this is more of an idea that I'd like to inhabit in order to think about something that just feels too big for me. And with my experience with growing up in like rural Montana, and I'm sure a number of you have had this experience too, where you're in the landscape and you see something as devastating as the Berkeley pit, and like, or just other sorts of Superfund sites or logging areas, and it just feels so massive, and we're so, I think a lot of other people have a sort of, a sort of scrim between them and the natural world, where it's part of our day-to-day reality. Yeah, that was a bit all over the place, but those are some of the things that I'm thinking of. So, let me see
Yeah, I'm
here.
just, I guess my struggle with it is that I think we're in a time where it's proving that time doesn't heal our morality.
No.
Time doesn't take care of it, because we have to confront all those decisions moment by moment.
Totally. I'm more thinking of it as a series of choices that we can make or not make. And those choices dictate what the future looks like. So, maybe I'll read these cards. So I think humans really struggle to think in scales as massive as geological time, or things as big as global warming. And so I like to think of it through time and choice. So let's take the plastic bottle. A choice to use a single-use plastic, which I do often, becomes amplified with time, population, and other populations doing the same, and it turns into vats of plastic. And then what does that become? It poisons our water, and maybe they become dangerous sink pits for our children. But I also like to think too that it'll become food for worm or bacteria, which by the way will eat all of your other stuff as well. Or it will become a fuel source for other maybe mutated kin in 10,000 years. So I'm not saying I like it, because I think that the best stuff is wildness, and I love the natural world. But it removes the morality of man versus nature and gives me the dignity and hope to face such massive experiences. And so it's like anti-human, but it's also just like a way of me trying to kind of think through it, because it just feels so big.
You still have me struggling. I'll get it.
Yeah, well, I would love to talk more about it. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm confused by it too.
Maybe I can I feel like in a conversation we had earlier, you said something about like you didn't separate the plastics from the human or the natural world, that it's all part of what one could consider to be the natural world. Is it linked in there?
Totally, yeah. And I guess that gets to the place of morality. Like, I don't see the separation between man and the living world. And I think that that's what's been allowed to exist for a really long time with a lot of very destructive consequences. And so if we want to cover the world in plastic, then we're doing it. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Do you feel like, just to piggyback off of that, so do you feel like, how about your choices as an individual artist? Are there any priorities for, like, acknowledging that there is choice and impact, and also this unknown geologic time of the impact of our choices with fusion and fission and pressures and so many unknowns, evolution, biology, all of these components? Do you feel, is there any kind of choice in here that your work isn't informed by? Are you sourcing materials from this place or that place, or is it arbitrary in this kind of theoretical framework?
I feel that there's a lot of conversation about what the individual can do, and it's our responsibility and mostly our government's responsibility to make choices about what is accessible, because it's to such a massive scale that big choices have to be made that the individual should not be pinned with, which I think historically has been, oil companies and multinational corporations are feeding us the idea that it's the individual. Personally, yeah, I do all the things, or try to. Recycle, and then I use a lot of found materials, but that's more for a choice of things that I like.
So, in terms of using found materials and materials that you choose to use, are you playing with that idea of this is going to last through geological time, and this piece will represent, what the world was like at this time versus the Dying Gall or Bosch, a representation of something that can last thousands of years?
I would love to, but I haven't really been able to. I've made some things that are like hopeful reliquaries for future, but I'm more thinking about it now and what people can see now. I just feel that make people seeing things and seeing through artwork is such a way to kind of go around those sensors that trigger despair. Or hopefully.
That's not real.
There's no such thing.
Yeah, we have one.
I guess kind of the conversation going on, it makes me think of you challenging the binary between man and nature. And back to what you said about the hierarchy of species. So then I noticed it seems like the Gall is maybe a new venture into a figure, because your work's been pretty non-human before. But I also see, especially with the melting face, how it connects to everything. But I don't know.
I know that one specifically, I'm just what is it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, I don't know if you had any thoughts about the figure feeling different, or I totally see the connection between Bosch and the art history direction, but
yeah.
just kind of wondering.
I guess I feel like I'm so new at looking back to those things I never really had such a traditional art history education, and so yeah, I'm not sure. Exploring it. Yeah. I don't know.
I guess I mean in general with the copying idea, Bosch and then this, and Bosch is kind of fantastical and it's more tangible and then, whoa, what else?
Totally. I know. I don't know.
Well, that's okay, you don't have to have
Yeah.
an answer. I just thought I'd.
Well, I think it's a really good question, and it's such a weird departure for me. The Bosch buildings came at a time when I like really needed to turn my head off and just be in the studio. And Julia Galloway, who is an angel, gave me a space at the campus just to, like a studio space just to work. And so I was able to make that out of like that beautiful porcelain as well. And so that was a really nice time that like I felt like it was okay just to copy them. And a lot more strange things came out of it in just the copying.
Of course, I mean, you're designing as you're copying, you're changing, you're enhancing.
Exactly.
Which is the same with the
Yeah, funny things are happening there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Good things to think about though, for sure. Why?
Any other questions? Oh, we got one.
As after working in this space, I'm just curious, what was something that maybe surprised you about utilizing this space and utilizing this technology? And was there anything that you felt like was a limitation in terms of using this whole realm of random stuff?
Yeah, the limitation is accessibility, which this place, like, it's incredible, the ways in which this is accessible to our community. And also, like, very knowledgeable people just willing to help you out and not make you feel stupid for not knowing what's going on. And then the issue of my access is like needing to know more software and tool sets, which is kind of always expanding and never been really one of my strong suits as well. Yeah, just like the ability to like actually see the things. I feel like something that I think about and also recognize in myself is like the saviorism of technology, especially as we are coming up against these like massive things. And getting closer to some of it is a reminder that it is still very much an earth thing. Yeah, and so it has its like flaws and its excitement and love and community, and it's still made out of stuff, you know, and yeah, I don't know. Did I miss any part of the question?
No. Okay, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I honestly like just having access to this stuff in a comfortable environment that's really important work.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you, the other users in the space while you were doing your residency, was there anything, any projects or anything that you saw people working on that made you want to say, ooh, I'll take that and like add it to my toolbox, or that gives me an idea for something, or anything like that?
Totally. Yeah, so there's this like box of discarded materials back here, plastic to be recycled. And there's just like such, before I even started printing, there's just like all these like really weird things in there. And I just like really like these things, and kind of had the feeling, I talked about it a little bit, like the objects, the finished, perfected objects don't always hold the mystery or the interest to me, but then like the discarded things hold the actual technology to it. It's almost like, this is kind of a stupid analogy, but it's almost like this is the twig in the forest that is the tree, whereas like this is just a plastic object. And so, I don't know, like the actual holding of like bigger ideas in an object as silly as this thing, as silly as this failed print is been definitely scratching. And then also just really fun to see what people want to make. Yeah, I love that part of it. And it's nice too, there's just like, there's sewing, and so somebody makes pillows, and then somebody comes in and like, I don't know, it's cool. Yeah. I'm used to it in an academic setting where it's very serious, and so it's nice to have the play in this space.
I agree with the play
Yeah,
sentiment.
that's key.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all so much.
Okay. A question along the same lines. Are you exploring ways of maybe adding randomization to your 3D process?
I've also found that just doing it often enough makes a randomized thing. And that's probably to say with my skill. Yeah, I am. And also thinking with those scans of ways in which I started out trying to learn how to code so I could make my sculpture in virtual reality, so I don't have to just keep carrying it around with me every other place I move, or shipping it actually, so I could just like ship it to them over the internet, and then they could put it in the space, and I wouldn't have to pay for storage units anymore. And then I was like actually making the thing and scanning it, and then maybe printing, but definitely putting it in like a virtual space. And so have started like just, I've been scanning the whole sculptures, but now I'm just doing pieces and adding those things together in these kind of unreal ways. So making this like actual unreal sculpture that like I could make in this tangible world, but it can exist in virtual spaces. Again, why? I don't know. Yeah, if not, I don't know yet. It's fun.
I kept feeling like when I was learning in here that I was like a human being being introduced to a pencil. I mean, there's all these pencils. Okay, how do I hold them? What do I do with this? How do I keep them sharp? How do I, and your brain's working that way. Trying to be creative with what can I do with this?
Yeah, I feel like I'm very much at the beginning of that process.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feel free to come up and ask Cait much more. Thanks, Cait.